world.
What up, bros? What up, bros? And welcome to Bruh Meets World. When it's Bruh Meets World. Your boy Meets World Fun God.
Hey guys, just jumping on real fast to let you know that this is going to be the second part of our review of Everybody Loves Stuart. If you guys did not get a chance to hear our first part, go back to last week's episode, listen to the whole thing, and then jump back into this one and you'll pick up right where we left off. Once again, we're still with Yasmine, who was giving us her takes, helping me and Siege break down this very important episode. So yeah, if you haven't gotten a chance to listen to part one, please go ahead and do that and then jump back here.
Point that this episode blatantly says that no one's above an ass whooping. They're doing their part to be like, no, he's gonna face consequences for a day, but we need to put everything in its proper context. And even though violence is never the answer, what it was in response to can also be equally horrific. And I think that that's what the show does a really good job of showing, is that violence is one way that we can hurt another person, but it's not the only way that we can hurt another person.
Because when Topanga, I think a few minutes later, like at that tail end of that scene, she approaches Stuart, telling him that he didn't cross the line, and she says to him, Corey protected me in the only way that he knows how. Mm-hmm. So it's this.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I wonder if we never see it, but I wonder. It would have been nice to see an interaction where Corey's like, do you want me to talk to him? Like, do you want me to get involved? Do you want your partner to be your defender in this? Or is this just like a man thing where I feel like I have to protect? It would have been interesting to understand that motivation a bit better, to understand where Corey was coming from in his thing. Because maybe Topanga didn't give him any details and he's just like, okay, she's uncomfortable. I just want to know I would just been interesting to have like a few more minutes of dialogue at the end of that dorm scene, maybe just to figure out where Corey his motivations were. One thing I just want to quickly say is we kind of skipped over this fun little moment.
I didn't skip. I was saving it for later.
I have notes too. But also, I want to say, if you guys remember, this is how we first met. Do you remember? So for the listeners who may not know, we first met because I was writing an article about 90s pop culture and how to consume it when some of it may be problematic. And you both cited this exact scene, which I used to open the story.
Wow.
About the soap opera names, because it is an important part of this episode and a theme in the series. So
wow, what a full circle moment.
That is so perfect.
Wow.
Yeah, because what's crazy is we didn't think of that when we invited you on. So the fact that you're right, 100% full circle. And I didn't forget about this moment because we have to we'll take a little breath from the main storyline to talk about what they call their soap opera name, which is you take your middle name and the street you grew up on. And what's most interesting about Angela's answer that they make Angela, I'm gonna say make Angela give, is that her soap opera name everyone else gets like really fun. Like there's a whole bit with Eric, which I'm not gonna lie, I loved. This is Will Friedle at his greatest. He just sells every line. He's so funny. You believe that he believes what's going on.
But he also has no idea what his middle name is. He says Jonathan at one point, but later on he talks to himself as Kyle. He says his middle name is at one point. Like, I just don't think he knows his middle name, but whatever.
And doesn't Jack say his name is Randall or his name? Yeah,
exactly.
Also, I want to say I did a little research on like this episode, of course, and apparently, I don't know if this is true. Apparently, they took that to give a little wink to Betsy Randall.
Oh, I love that.
True, wow. But I read that and I was like, oh, that's nice. That's cute.
I love that. You know what? I hope it is, because that's really nice. So we have some fun with like the name game, the soap opera name game that we're doing.
Well, we also learned the middle names of all the characters, which I think we knew except for Rachel and Angela. We knew Eric's middle name and we knew Sean Patrick Hunter. But yeah, that was just a little bit more detail on Rachel that we just didn't know either. We didn't know her middle name because we didn't know anything about Rachel.
And it's actually fun that we're getting to know Rachel in this way. And they're doing things that like you would do when you're trying to like build a friend group. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then they go and they have Angela's answer is Shanaynay Martin Luther King Boulevard. And that to me, that like I'm gonna say, like in an episode filled with things, this is like a top tier bruh moment.
Yeah.
Because it's just like because it's literally unnecessary. It's like you could have done one or the other. This could like the idea that you had the only like I'm not gonna lie, if Eric's said that his soap opera name was Shanaynay Martin Luther King Boulevard, that would probably be funny. But the fact that they give it to the only Black character, and it's something that it's played for jokes, as if, oh, we know Black people have weird names, and we know every Black person grew up on a Martin Luther King Boulevard. It's inappropriate.
Yeah.
What's really telling about this too, just so you know, like where I was at this moment. So I think we're like 2 years removed from Chris Rock's Bring the Pain special. And in that special, he specifically says like, Martin Luther King stood for non-violence. Now what's Martin Luther King? A street. And I don't care where you live in the country, if you're on Martin Luther King Boulevard, there's some violence going down. So there was just like this public opinion of what it meant to live on a Martin Luther King Boulevard. So I just thought it was really interesting that of all the street names they gave her, Martin Luther King Boulevard was the one. Also, we know her to be an army brat. So that doesn't even make sense to her character.
Exactly. That's where I was saying it really. And for those of you who don't know and may not have known this, Martin Luther King Boulevard is typically one of the lowest funded. It's a street in one of the lower income areas. It is literally like almost like the city does it as a throwaway themselves to be like, look, we've given you some kind of respect. How could this be? We love Martin Luther King and we named this street after him. How bad could this street be?
Yeah.
And so the idea that they would do just kind of like the Shanaynay, as if there's something wrong with that name. You know, it's not that there's anything wrong with the name Shanaynay. It's the fact that they consider it a joke. And by they, I mean like these white writers, this white writer room feels like that is the joke and that is something worth pointing out.
There is a reference to that I want to make to an episode we recorded, I think last year, where Writer Strong was saying that they had to hire a Black writer to write for Angela. So maybe all of this, like I'm in my, studying white history class, Martin Luther King Boulevard, maybe that's coming from a Black perspective in the writer's room. I don't know. But I just thought it was kind of interesting, that feeling of, and maybe CG, you know what I'm talking about. When you show your Blackness in a white space and it gets uncomfortable, is how I felt Angela felt in that moment. And I really strongly related to that, where she's like, my middle name would be Shanaynay Martin Luther King Boulevard. And all her friends look at her awkwardly. And she's like, I guess I got to get some Black friends. And there's just kind of crickets and they just move on. And I'm just like, ooh, I've been in that uncomfortable position before.
So what's funny to me is the Shanaynay Martin Luther King Boulevard portion of it is something to where I was like, even if that was written by a Black writer, that was written for a white writer's room.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, this is how I make you laugh. This is what you find funny about my culture. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, and one thing I do want to point out, and I don't know if this was intentional, but this is like a way to kind of see the good in things, I guess, is that Sean's soap opera name is Patrick Trailer Park. So Patrick Trailer Park and Shanaynay Martin Luther King Boulevard feel like, hey, it's almost like, hey, we're the others of the group. And it's almost like you can see the connection that they might have as being others based on just that little bit of information that they're giving in the game. And maybe that's me looking too deep into it.
I'm gonna say, I'm gonna volley it right back and say, actually, to me, it's almost like a primer, almost like a grooming. It's like, we said this for Sean, so how bad could this joke be? It's one of those things where it's like, oh, we made fun of where Sean's from. Why can't we make fun of where Angela's from? And it's like, it's like, because you're living in this, like, and as someone who's kind of talked about this before, and even said that when listening to the Pod Meets World podcast, they talk about this. It's because you want to live in a I don't see color world. At the exact same time you make jokes like this. And you can't do both. You can't try to be like, oh, it's all the same, but at the exact same time hit on something that is in fact very sensitive. You either need to acknowledge that you're entering sensitive territory, or you need to actually not make that joke, and not equate the two, if that makes sense.
Well, and forgive me if we're going on too long with this, but one of the things that really stood out to me in that moment too is that I was reminded of how segregated television was in 1998. To get like a Black perspective in any white show felt foreign, because there was WB and UPN and Fox, who had the Black shows, and then CBS, ABC, and NBC had the white shows, and those were always the ones that were in the that were on the covers of magazines, that were getting on the press, even though shows like Living Single and Martin and Different World outperformed a lot of these shows in ratings. There was just a divide and a separation on my actual television. It felt like I was watching a white show or I was watching a Black show, and it was very apparent from the time the show started. So I think part of what's so like weird about it is, you're right, like they're not bringing in any of her Blackness unless it's to make a joke of it, and so it kind of rubs you the wrong way.
It's interesting because I think it was in a recent Pod Meets World episode where Trina McGee said that the writers had asked her to tone down her Blackness. And so it's interesting to see here, but not when we're making a joke about you.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said.
Yeah.
So we got that moment, but what's almost funny is, like, as a way to not spend too much time on that kind of shot, immediately after is when Stuart flies through the window, and a few things are happening. One, Corey is unapologetic about it. Corey's like, I did what needed to be done. It is what it is. And what's even more interesting is how everyone shows up. Like Alan and Amy come to the college, and what's interesting to me is they both come up and they're like, whatever you've done, we're behind you. And I was like, that's very interesting that your son is in trouble at college, and you immediately, I'm not saying that you shouldn't believe your son. I'm just saying it's very telling, as we know, again, looking at 2022 in college culture and the number of white guys who in college who have done things, how their parents show up to the school and they're immediately like, whatever it is, whatever you've done, I'm behind you, no question.
We'll take care of it. Yeah, we'll make it go away. One thing I want to point out about that scene specifically, where everyone comes to comfort Corey in the room afterwards, is that like Sean says, you know what, Corey, typically when you spiral, it's funny, but this time you crossed the line. And I just want to point that out because we've been talking about how like almost manic Corey's been this season. And it's like, Sean's like, no, I see you acting different. And honestly, most of the time it's funny, but now you hit this teacher that I like. So what's up? So it was almost like, to hit Stuart, this teacher that Sean respected, was the line that was crossed, compared to all the other weird things that Corey's been doing this season. So I just thought that was interesting.
Also, he said, how could you do this to Stuart?
Yeah, to Stuart.
And I thought, how could you do this to Stuart? And again, like, as we were talking about earlier, like, poor Sean, because he's, he's put his trust in this person, and he can't imagine that Stuart would do anything to deserve to be pushed or to be hit, and it just shows how people in power can manipulate things and manipulate your trust in order to distort the optics, right?
It's too bad Sean doesn't have Eric's fifth sense, otherwise he would have been able to see right through it.
One of the things that's interesting to me about the dorm room scene is it's so telling by everyone's reaction, because we talked about Amy and Alan, and we talked about even Eric again being like, I'm willing to lie, I saw the whole thing, Corey didn't do anything, and even though Corey just confessed like 5 seconds earlier and gave reason for it. But what's interesting to me is that Corey goes, this is all gonna go away.
Yeah.
And it's very much telling that Corey's like, no, I did the right thing. It'll all work itself out.
Mhm.
And it's just like that, this naivety about the whole situation.
Yeah.
Where they're like, no, you can get expelled. This is a really big deal.
Yeah, Feeney can't even fuck his way out of this problem for you. He's trying to clap the cheeks of the dean. He's trying to make it happen, and it's not working. So, like, you're on your own here.
But I think also goes to show, which they talk about, towards the end of the episode, they have really lived largely, perhaps not Sean, but, in a protected bubble.
Yeah.
And they haven't experienced life in a lot of ways,
Yeah, their naivety really shines throughout the entire episode. Like for every character, Topanga, Sean, Corey, like all of them are like naive at different aspects of the episode and have points of realization of just like, oh no, I was being too naive about this. I kind of want to talk about the honeypot scene. Is that
well? So we're gonna get there because what I wanted to say is I honestly, you know what? I can't remember if this is before or after, so everyone help me out. But there's the scene where Topanga confronts Stuart.
Yeah, it's So Rachel does her thing first, and then Topanga kind of circles to him afterwards.
So we can do the honeypot scene first. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting that so we have this scene where Eric, Jack, and Rachel. By the way, Eric is like, I'm an older brother. I'm going to take care of Corey, which is kind of nice. We haven't really seen him have a lot of interactions with Corey. But so the way he decides to solve this problem is like, hey, this guy is a dangerous, predatory dude on college students. Rachel, I'm going to throw you to the wolves.
I want to back up here a little bit because
he offers it to Jack.
I want to say we got to back up because you know how I'm at with my Baywatch, and this is a situation where, in reality, Eric shows his true colors in the sense of him being like, I think that either one of you could do this. So Jack, you go over there and seduce him. And I was like, oh, it's interesting to me because what he's actually saying is I don't see any difference between Jack being sexy and Rachel. Like,
interesting.
I feel like he literally doesn't make a big deal out of it.
I love that.
Wow. Wow. I was just saying that, like, yeah, he does try to throw Eric or Rachel over there, but I just think it's interesting that, Jack and Rachel, he's like, either one of you could go over there and do this, but I don't have a problem with either of you two getting involved with this predator. So I just thought that was really interesting. That even though he wants to fix the situation, the way he's going about it is to really throw Rachel to the wolves in a very literal way.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the first thing that I noticed, again, was how, Rachel is getting sexualized in a demeaning way, which happens a few times in this episode, and I don't know, like to try to seduce a confession out of Stuart, I just don't know. I know it feels gross, right? And I think, again, it's these little moments within this episode, like from how Rachel is treated to, Angela's soap opera name, I think it just, again, highlights how in a certain time some things were considered acceptable. Okay.
Not only does he throw Rachel to the wolves, but he also insults her. Like there's this moment where he goes, well, I'm more woman than that. It's like this idea of like we know and see that Rachel is kind of dealing with a breakup, and later on it kind of like when Stuart rejects her, she takes that personally. So there is like an insecurity going on or happening with Rachel in general, which does kind of make sense, but the show just kind of again plays it for laughs, which it's a comedy or whatever, but it's like at whose expense? Sure. And I think that's kind of like the thing that I'm really responding to is just the idea that Rachel is once again sexualized, once again demeaned, and then told that even as a woman, Eric could be more woman than she is.
Yeah, like to your point, it's like the show is not necessarily saying like, hey, we need to respect women. It's almost saying like we need to respect Topanga, the pure you know, one of the group, like that whole thing. Like, it's like her innocence, her purity is the thing that made her desirable to Stuart. And, you know, Rachel isn't his type for whatever reason, because he, you know, who knows, maybe it is that purity thing that, you know, the show keeps pushing as like the main thing girls should be. Because I feel like we're getting a lot of like purity subplots and things like that in the background.
Immediately, this makes me there are so many sitcoms in the 90s, or shows in the 90s, where you have the like virgin and the whore, right?
Yeah.
Immediately I think about Dawson's Creek.
Dawson's Creek.
Joey
Yeah.
and Jen, right?
Joey and Jen.
And I mean, you see these two different women, and you know, and the show is telling you to condemn the one who, you know, has sex and who does non-pure things, and you're, you know, the virginal innocent one, you know. And I mean, this is something like throughout culture is a I can't think of the word right now, but it's a theme, right?
The Madonna horror complex.
A trope. Yeah,
it's a trope. Yeah, definitely.
I was gonna say, to me, it's very interesting because it also kind of shows how people misinterpret things like this. Like Eric being like, "Oh, you go over there and seduce him." It's like it takes away, and it's like, "Oh, that's just like he just is a predator to all women. He or all anyone who would be sexual to him. It's this uncontrollable urge and not this really strategic plan." Like that, like Eric responds to it as in, "Oh, if he gets any other kind of temptation, he's going to take the bait." And it's like, no, that's not what's going on here. This was very specifically a targeted individual. And again, I think they inadvertently show that it's not, oh, this guy is a danger to any and everyone. It's more so this guy is very intelligent about what he's doing, and it's not him reacting, it's him planning ahead.
Well, I mean, the show has been telling us the whole episode, like, hey, you're not in high school anymore. So Eric trying to use these hijinks to solve this problem isn't going to work against someone who's an actual villain. Like, it's not the same. Like, this isn't Harley. This isn't just one of those things that you feel like you can just comedically work your way out of. It's going to take something a little bit more intense, which leads us to Topanga talking to Stuart, which I loved, by the way. I loved that we saw her just be like, hey, I have enough strength in myself to come to you and say you crossed the line and just to ask you to just stop all of this. And I just thought it was really interesting that his response was to gaslight her and to say, well, no, you came on to me. I'll see you at the hearing.
Whew. Oh my God. Woo. Again, power dynamics, you know, to Stuart, who's university going to believe? This beloved, charismatic teacher that everybody, you know, thinks is so great, or this young girl, you know, and he's trying to work that to his advantage. And it's, and again, that was another moment I remember, even when I first watched it, feeling infuriated that this is happening. And you, again, like, all credit to Danielle, like her face and how she, you know, reacts to hearing him twist that and gaslight her is just, it's very powerful.
It's also very interesting because I think, again, for a kids show, it really clearly illustrates the he said, she said. It's like it's a perfect example of, like, again, as the audience, you're like, that's not what, like, a kid could be like, wait a minute, that's not what happened. He's lying. And it's just like, yeah, but does that matter? Can that be proven in not a court of law, because that's not what they end up doing, but like, can that just be proven in an argument? And I think that this is really interesting. But also, we talked about the power dynamics, and I'm going to bring it up now because I'm not going to bring it up in my homework, but we've been watching the show Dahmer, and that entire show is about the institutions and how they've failed the victims, and very much Dahmer being aware of, as you said, TC, who are they going to believe? Even when things are very, very obvious, even let's say, even if you don't think Stuart did it, what is statistically most likely to have happened in that situation.
Yeah.
And people still weigh things like, we'll have to see. I don't know.
Yeah.
He still gets the benefit of the doubt, even though statistically we know that that probably happened. Even if she's wrong, they should err on the side of caution. But he understands that that's not what's happening in this moment.
Sure.
In this moment, he's getting the benefit. And I thought that that was very interesting.
I have to say, this reminds me of, I don't want to like get into this one, but Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, like, and how that played out in the media. You know, the world doesn't want to believe that this movie star that they have grown up loving could be capable of such horrible things, right?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
One question I wanted to ask you guys, I didn't know what was the best time to ask, was that, did you guys ever have a Stuart? Did you guys ever have a teacher that was either inappropriate to you or inappropriate to other students that you were aware of? Someone who blurred the lines between professionalism and non-professionalism? I guess I just wanted to know if you guys have experiences with that, because I had a Stuart.
Really?
I knew of a Stuart. I knew of a Stuart at our high school.
Oh, high school. So it's so funny. We're not gonna go there. I don't know if we're talking about the same person, because this is something we'll have to talk about offline. But I will say that I was thinking high school, and I'm aware of a situation in high school that I was. And again, I think it's interesting that you say this, because the number of things that I've learned as I've grown up, or like I've just seen people talk about or recount about when they were kids as if it was just casual, but it's like common knowledge is so upsetting to me, because as you said, there are things that were, when I think about, I was like, oh no, I didn't have that in high school. In college, I had that in high school, but my mind was like, no, not that it's a problem that it was when we were younger. I was just like, oh no,
it just happened earlier.
Yeah, just happened when we were younger and not of age.
Exactly, but it's something where it's like, if you and I are talking about the same person, it was common knowledge.
Well,
and I think that's pretty interesting.
The thing I want to say about that is that, so our Stuart was the reason I'm going to say this. I'm just going to call the teacher Stuart. The Stuart that I'm referring to was in high school, was a female teacher, and she was the coolest teacher I ever had. She was so cool. She treated us with respect. She joked with us. She would curse sometimes, which was like a thing teachers weren't supposed to do. And like, we would hang out in her room after school, and just like, we even like helped paint her house. We went to her house a few times, like all this stuff. And then like, she started talking to us about things that were like weird. Like, why do I know how this teacher lost her virginity? Why do I know what this teacher's sex life is like? Why do I know that this teacher is actively cheating on her husband and talking to me about the stories of it? Things that like, I was just like, oh, this is just a friend who's going through some stuff and talking to me about it. No different than my high school friends talking to me about stuff. Me not thinking that there was anything weird about it, to the point when she came to me and she's like, hey, I'm considering sleeping with a student. What she actually said to me, I was like, I don't think you should. Was all I was so casual with it. I was just like, oh, because she told me the name of the student she was thinking about doing it with, and I was like, oh, he's an asshole. Like, I was just like, I was so much more.
It's like, you could do better.
I was in such disbelief of the student she was considering and allegedly did hook up with, that I wasn't even paying attention. Like, I don't know. I was like season 1 Dawson's Creek, where I was just like, Pacey and this teacher are like doing this thing, and I'm just like, oh, it's weird, but like, whatever, high school. And I just didn't understand the gravity of it. So when I'm watching this episode and I'm seeing how Stuart is like blurring the lines and becoming friends and all this stuff, it's hard to not think about this instance that I experienced. And anyways, I just wanted to throw that in there just because I wanted to see if that was,
Wow. I personally have not had a Stuart, but I have seen in high school throughout a few.
Yeah.
Women and men.
Yeah.
Female and male teachers. Yeah, and also funnily, not funnily, it's not funny. But interestingly, yesterday I was hanging out with a girlfriend, and we went to, I changed high schools a couple times, and we knew each other, but my first one, grade 8, grade 9. And I remember we were talking about teachers who, I don't know how it came up, but teachers who had crossed the line. And she reminded me, and I remember her telling me this when it happened. There was a teacher who I think he showed pornography to the class. Like,
wow.
And obviously he got kicked out. But yeah, but she reminded me of that. But yeah, so I remember that happened. But there was a few. I remember a female teacher that I had, and she would openly flirt with all the boys in the class, and they all loved it, and they were like, "Oh, she's so hot," and she totally played into it, like in the classroom, which is like, and I remember even sitting there and being like, seeing like, this is not okay, and like, because it was just so, the way that she was acting was really, it was like really inappropriate. And even then it was like, she was also rude to the female students. It was very weird. Yeah.
It's so funny. Like, I think what's interesting, I think it's kind of sad that all of our examples are like, not in college, in high school. Yeah.
That didn't happen in college.
Yeah. I think that's really that's even more upsetting. But also, you brought up something which I think is really important about both this episode and just in the larger context, is you were like, well, I was watching Dawson's Creek and that was happening. So I was just like, oh, this is something that happens. And I just let it go.
Yeah.
And it's one of the problems I have with TV shows that constantly show relationships between teachers and students, is it does create this world where where students are like, oh, that's a thing that happens. It's more scandalous that it's happening, kind of like scandalous that so-and-so made out with so-and-so. It's just like, it's not the crime that it is. It's just this scandalous thing that I can just go about. And I actually am not taking it as seriously or reporting the way that I should. And I think that what's great about this episode is it shows how that is actually inappropriate. Yeah. And I want more TV shows to be like, no. If a teacher is getting too close, you should actually consider that a very, very big red flag.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the, more than a handful I can think of students, who are teachers throughout my grade school, middle school, high school, fired or under investigation for inappropriate behavior. So, and like the fact that this show is actually confronting that and introducing kids to the concept of it, I think is something that we can say like, hey, it happens. It's real life. So I'm glad that they're showing kids. But I mean, this whole idea of it not being high school anymore doesn't have to be after high school that this stuff happens. So.
And this is the thing, and I think because this is, by all definitions, it's a kid's show, right? And so we're watching it, we're like 12, we're not 19 or 20. And, it's, I think, very important that, and incredible that they showed this on a kid's show and not glamorizing it like Dawson's Creek or another show.
Well, I think Dawson's Creek was able to glamorize it because it was a woman who was doing it instead of a man, which is always treated differently. When a female teacher crosses the line, it's always seen as like, oh man, that student's such the man. Like, I can't believe you hooked up with a teacher. Like, almost getting praised for getting sexually abused in a way that's confusing for the student, I'm sure. But when a male teacher does it, it's treated completely differently. It's treated like, oh, we got this pervert off campus right away. And so like, it's just interesting that like, even in our television, I mean, Dawson's Creek was what, the same year, 97, 98, that we're seeing just like two different portrayals of student-teacher relationships and the way that it's being treated.
I have to say, I just thought of this. Did you guys ever watch Third Rock from the Sun?
Oh, I was literally thinking about it right now. You're right.
I love that show. It is, total side note, it is fucking brilliant. It is so smart. It's so funny. Watch it. It's amazing. Viewers, watch it. But there is, it's like early on, Tommy's really young. I think it's like it's either the first or maybe the second season, maybe the third season. It's like quite early on. He's still like he's a kid, right? And he is in love with his music teacher, I think she is. And she in their reality, she doesn't cross that line as far as I can remember, if I'm remembering correctly. She like maintains that boundary. But he has all of these like fantasies about her, and he like dumps his girlfriend to like be with his like in his mind like be with his teacher. And he has this, which was also on a side note, I can't remember, maybe it was season 2, like their season finale, which was in 3D, and it like won an Emmy, and it was like really amazing. I remember buying like 3D glasses to watch it when I was like 11. But his whole that season finale, like they had each of the characters have like a nightmare or like a dream, and they did the whole thing in 3D. And Tommy's was about him like running to this deserted island, and his teacher like fanning him and like feeding him grapes or whatever. And and this is the thing, it's like if you're like a kid watching this, and it's like glamorizing this relationship, this dynamic between student and teacher, like it's telling you like this is okay, this is like a fantasy, you all have it, and like it's fine, dump your girlfriend to be with your music teacher, or you know what I mean. It's just, it really kind of, it's the culture of that time, right? It kind of.
Well, I also just want to say about the 90s is that I grew up in a decade watching a movie where a kid got a blank check and got a date with a grown woman. So like there was just so much weirdness going on between like older women and kids in the 90s. Like, oh, it's just like it's normal to fantasize about older women. There's no distinction.
Yeah. Oh my God, Big?
Yeah. Big is another one where we're like,
Big. What the fuck is that movie? Oh my God.
That's a whole other conversation. Looking at the time, I think we should get to the hearing.
The hearing,
Going to the hearing, I think a few things are going on. One, even though, again, as much as I enjoy it so much, Eric comes in and he's kind of being playful and all this other stuff. And Feeny, but like Feeny's like shutting it down. He's like, yo, this is not the time. Like any other time we could do this, but Eric, this is very, very serious. And I think that what's interesting is Feeny's energy this entire time is like, you guys don't understand how real world we're getting right now. This is real world things. To me, that this show does something really annoying, which is constantly insert Corey into a narrative that honestly didn't need to be about Corey.
Definitely.
And this is a way of like, we're having this Corey about Corey, this scene about Corey who may be suspended over his actions, when we should just be talking about what happened with Topanga. But we're not. We're talking about Corey's reaction to Topanga. So much so that it's so funny to me because I noted it while I was watching it with my partner. There's a scene where Corey goes on this long speech, Stuart goes on this long speech, Feeny goes on this long speech. Topanga's like, you know what you did. And the Dean's like, we respect each other here.
Yeah.
And then Sean gets a monologue. And I'm like, we're literally not letting the woman, the girl who this happened to, get no voice in this entire scene.
One thing totally true about that. And what's even really revealing to me in this courtroom scene or this hearing is that we begin to see how strategic Stuart has been about everything, because it's in there that he's just like, Sean said I'm the best teacher I've ever had. I asked Angela to stay in the room. You made her go away. What are you talking about? We were just talking about this paper. Like every excuse that he has for his behavior is laid out in such a way that you're like, oh, this motherfucker knew what he was doing the entire time.
It really highlights the difference between Mr. Feeney and Stuart, the difference between the teachers, and like right away, Mr. Feeney's like he's appalled. What were you doing in your room, Stuart? And he's like, what did he say? I think like
it wasn't a bedroom when I was in there. A dorm can be anything. It's a study. It's a hangout. Like it wasn't a bedroom when I was in there.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And it's interesting because, Stuart says, my students and I have a relationship outside the classroom, which allows us to connect better inside the classroom. And of course, you may think Feeny has one as well, but that is based on as we said before, him being their teacher, he honors that boundary. He doesn't blur those lines. And then even Sean goes on to say that, like, he's been our teacher through grade school, through high school. He wants to protect us. So like right away, like that distinction, right? Stuart treats us as equals. Feeney wants to protect us. It's like,
I think it's interesting because I don't want to neglect the fact that Sean, again, this is a television show, and for everyone who always like, you guys are reading into a television show, yeah, I know, I get that, but it's really important to point out that Sean, they're like, Sean's okay with it, and it's like, what in what world does that matter? Like
Sean's
why would
Sean's like, hey, can I stop the hearing to say something? Corey, I'm okay, you beat his ass. Hey, Sean's okay with it, so we're good, right? I can go.
Yeah, exactly. But like what I'm saying is Sean's experience is elevated. Sean's experience is elevated over Topanga's.
Yeah.
Who this happened to throughout. Like Stuart is like, hey, Sean, do you think I'm a good teacher? Sean's like, yeah, I did. And he goes, Sean also gets a moment to be like, hey, I'm okay with Corey's reaction. And they're like, that's good. And it's just like, okay, but how is that relevant at all to anything that's going on in this particular situation?
Although I have to say, I thought that was a really poignant moment when he said, I'm okay with it, because I think it shows for him also, like, that illusion is now shattered. The illusion of who he imagined Stuart to be, this person who made him believe in something, which is, for his character, of course, like I 100% agree Topanga should have been front and center here. That being said, I think it's also significant that, Sean is always chasing after wanting to believe in something, and this guy makes him feel that. And I think you can see that also on his face, like that illusion is I like how I just went like this. The illusion is
jazz fingers.
The illusion is shattered. But and I think that's a big deal. And I think that is a moment,
That's a great point.
That is significant.
It reminds me a lot of when he confronts the cult leader in the hospital, and he's just like, hey, I'm done. I'm done believing in you. And so it just, I think that's what you're kind of referring to, is that like this kind of moment where Sean realizes, hey, I've been sticking up for this guy all episode, and now I'm done. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'm glad we understood that moment from Sean, but did it have to come in the hearing, and did it have to come in place of Topanga's testimony? I don't think so.
Absolutely think that Sean, like, I'm glad that we got that moment for Sean, but for me, I'm always like, what's the trade-off? And it, like, I would rather have traded off that moment of Sean getting that to have Topanga have a little bit more voice in what happened, especially since it'd be one thing if Topanga didn't want to talk, but the fact that Topanga wants to and is shut down by another woman, even is really, really important.
Yo, can I just say something? And maybe this is just me, and you guys let me know what you think. But at this point presently, the Dean and Feeney are getting it all, right? Like, he's a little too familiar with his boss that he just started hanging out with, talking, come on, Dean, there's got to be something more you can do. Come on. It's just like, oh, so you're talking to her like you've been over her house before. You're talking to her like you guys have a relationship outside the classroom as well, Feeney. Like, it just felt like he was using his relationship with the dean to try to help Corey in a way where I was like, oh, do you even have a relationship with the dean at this point? So it just made me think that maybe something's going on when class is dismissed.
Also, side note, that's his wife in real life.
Oh,
100%.
Yes, for
100%.
sure.
I know you guys know that.
Yeah, no, but like I think that's really important because that kind of picks up on the chemistry between them.
Yeah.
But I think to TC's point, it's also inappropriate. It's like this is like Feeney, you are taking this a little too personally. You're a little too involved. But I think of course, as the audience, we want this reaction from Feeney. But the dean is right to be like, George, you need to take a step back, and you need to understand that this is not this isn't a classroom. This isn't everyone gets a vote and like we get to no, this is like a adult institution, and we will be handling this as such, this is very serious. And I just think that that's really interesting. One more thing I wanted to talk about, just in terms of the hearing and what's going on, is this idea of Stuart asking questions to Topanga
directly,
that are more than yes or no questions. And what I was like, to me, is like, in these situations, they all know that the truth is so much more than just a yes or a no. But in these type of situations, whether it's a courtroom or any other kind of like justice hearing, it's just like, did this happen? Yes or no? Yes, but thank you. And he's just constantly, anytime she answers, he's like, did it? Yep, you did have an opportunity. Thank you. That is all. That's all I needed.
That, like, and oh my God, is that infuriate when he just like cuts her off like that? That infuriates me so much, because again, her voice is silenced, right? And also it just shows like how, like, as TCU said earlier, how calculated his whole thing was. Like, did I do this? Yes, but no, just the yes. That's enough.
Just the yes. Yeah. And it also goes to show that, like, hey, women, when you go into a courtroom or a court setting, you're going to be asked questions, and the lawyer can very well be like, no, that's it. That's all I want. Like, you don't get to elaborate on the details. So just kind of further, exploring that gray area. I want to give credit to the dean. I want to give credit to this character that we've only seen a handful of times, that I feel like I've grown a love for in a very short amount of time. And the way that she's able to be like, I have to, in the same way that George has ethics to how professional he needs to be, I have those same ethics. I need to be professional. I need to punish Corey for hitting a teacher point blank. Like, I can't let this go unpunished. But I'm also going to take into context the larger issue here. Stuart, this is a teacher. I don't know what the fuck you are, bro, but I'm gonna find out. I was just like, yo, Dean, I love you. I'm here for you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that's what's interesting about her ruling is, Corey's very fortunate to have someone who would consider everything. And for me, what I saw, I don't think that it's a mistake that her being a woman in a position of power also makes a difference, because the fact that she's there, she absolutely was like, you know what? Based on everything I've heard, I don't know enough. All I do know is that he did hit someone, and therefore there has to be punishment. But also, the punishment should fit the crime, and based on what I've heard, this seems sufficient enough. But at the exact same time, as you said, I'm also going to be opening an investigation into you, Stuart, because based on everything that I've heard and everything that I know as a professional woman in this field, something else happened that we're not able to really pin down, and we're going to find that out. And I just think that that's really important. The idea of her being like, you know what? It's more than just what can be argued. And based on my understanding and my life experience, something else happened, and we're going to figure out what it was.
Totally.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was her. I think especially when, we're talking about power dynamics and people in authority, and you see the different levels, right? You have the comparison between Feeney and Stuart, and then, the comparison between the dean and Stuart.
Yeah. Or even the difference between Topanga and the dean in terms of how Stuart shows respect to someone who's in authority and someone who's not in authority. He's always, like I said, since the beginning of the episode, when he sees the dean, he's very, very respectful, but he doesn't apply that same respect to women who he feel he can take advantage of. So one last thing I just want to say about the hearing, and you guys can give me your last thoughts on it too. I love that at the end of everything, the kids were like, y'all just want to go get some ice cream. Like, y'all just want to like this was too much adult for us, right? Like this was, we dove into the pool of adult. We kept saying we wanted to be adults, and now we're here and we want to be kids again. We want to go get some ice cream. We want to go to Chubby's. We want to like regress back to a time where like we didn't have to feel so unsafe. And just like being a millennial, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
We're doing a 90s podcast partly because like it's so enjoyable sometimes to just revert back to a simpler time where things were easily understood than going out into the world that you don't understand. So I just thought that the kids getting ice cream was so much more than just, hey, let's go get ice cream.
I totally agree. And I think that whole last little bit where you know, Feeney's like, you're not kids anymore. You're not children anymore, he says, you know, and it spells it out. And he says, this is life and these things happen. And all of them, you know, they, again, I think the acting, just the emotional reactions on their faces, like once again here, is really powerful. And you can see they realize, okay, we're not kids anymore. We are becoming adults. We're in the real world, dealing with real things, dealing with life. But yet still, they're still like, they are still kids in a lot of ways too. Let's go get some ice cream and like try to hold on to that a little bit.
Yeah.
Try to hold on to that a little bit, I think, is really that's kind of like the essence of that last scene of just being like, hey, it's only getting realer from here on out. Just take those small. And I think if anything, I saw that scene and I was like, I think more adults should be like, you know, there's a meme that went around or whatever. It's like, I remember today that I'm an adult and I can buy an entire cake if I want to. And it's just like, yeah, sometimes you do need to remind yourself as an adult that you still have access to those childlike things because they're so important in a world that's constantly asking you to like face these really harsh realities. Go get some ice cream.
Yeah.
Totally. And it's like after the pandemic, it's like my soul needs ice cream. You know what I mean? Sometimes you go through some hard shit and you just like, I need a source of comfort. Like I need something to be a home base at a time where everything feels like it could disappear or is uncertain. Which
it's important to have those things.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's important to have that. You have to have some comfort in your life. You have to have things that, you know, bring you that sense. If you had something in a time where you felt life was simple and, you know, things weren't so hard and it was, you know, innocent in a sense, you know, and
reminding yourself of the good things of life when you're experiencing something that's so horrific. Yeah.
I think it's funny because you were like, as millennials, we are kind of like we just spent the first half of this episode talking about Fred Savage, and it's so many things of just like, oh man, the dude from Wonder Years, you know, it's like, so I feel like every day in a millennial lifestyle is like learning that like the Flintstone vitamins that you used to eat actually had I don't know, lead in them. You know, it's like you're like every day you find out and you're like, really? You know, like, that's one more thing that I can't enjoy freely. And I think that it reminds me of another meme. I don't know if you guys realize this. I live by memes, but there was another meme where someone was like, the world has always been hard. It's not that things were easier when you were younger. You just weren't aware.
Yeah.
And I think that that's pretty much how I feel this episode is. It's just like, oh, by the way, the world that this is happening in has always been around. The world of Dan Schneider's and Fred Savage's and all of these things. It's always been here. Your awareness of them wasn't there. And sometimes, again, just going back to it, there are going to be times where it's like being an adult is actually facing that hardship, but that doesn't mean that you can't just like go get some ice cream and block it all out for a little bit because it's hard.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
That's exactly what they're experiencing in this episode. You know, they're realizing like, oh shit, like this is something that happens in the real world. And, you know, we're just starting to learn that.
Can I just quickly throw something in as just a final thing that just this makes me think of? Have you guys heard of Matilda the musical?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of it. I haven't seen it. I've heard of it.
Yeah. It's been on Broadway. They're making a Netflix movie of it for Christmas. But there's a great song that they sing called "When I Grow Up," and the lyrics are, "When I grow up, I'll be brave enough to fight the creatures that you have to fight beneath the bed each night to be a grown up." And this episode just really reminded me of that a lot, of just like, you have to be brave enough to just like fight the monsters under the bed sometimes. Like that's part of life. And yeah, I just thought that was a great cap for this.
Wow.
Absolutely. Okay. What was in Yasmine, we'll give you the floor. What was your bruh moment? What was the one that you're gonna pick out?
Okay, I think for me, the one thing that like really watching it today,
Yeah.
like in today's context, I think those little subplots, you know what I mean? I think like in two ways. Eric, the way that Rachel is treated, Eric trying to convince Rachel to seduce a confession out of Stuart, and like how she's like sexualized and demeaned and a lot in this episode. And then also, you know, Angela's stereotypical soap opera name. You know, and I mean, again, this is a 90s sitcom. You know, it is also a document of its time. There are these things that were not considered offensive or wrong back then, even though they were, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, seeing those moments now, you know, it's like, oof, yeah.
Siege, do you have a bro moment?
I was gonna say, so the Angela name thing is, to me, it's like, again, it's just such a jarring one because it came out of left field. But I really want to give credit to the idea of Topanga not having a voice in that courtroom. When we let Eric speak. We let Sean speak. Two people who have like no, like Corey having his
Eric
monologue.
didn't speak. Jonathan Cumberland, attorney at law, spoke.
But the idea that he gets time to do his bit, and Sean gets time to like discuss how much he enjoyed having Stuart as a teacher, but like Topanga doesn't get a voice in this moment. That is just one of those things where it's like, it was something that stuck with me. Angela doesn't even get to speak, and Angela was the one who was actually the other witness, you know?
Yeah, definitely, totally. Yeah, both. I think both you guys picked the bruh moments that I was thinking of. My main bruh moment is going to be the thing that I asked at the beginning of this episode, which is that the fact that Fred Savage took this role at all is so weird, bruh. Like, this dude who's getting accused of all this stuff years ago played a role where he did all the things that he's getting accused of. Like, bruh, that's the most like 2022 thing I'm taking from this episode, is that Fred Savage is playing a character that he later maybe turns into. It's weird. So
absolutely. Feeny, tell me, what is the lesson of this episode?
I'll say, I think, to plain and simple, being aware that there are people in authority who abuse their power and will take advantage of that.
Absolutely. That's a really good one. I'm gonna go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, again, to me, it's like, you're not kids anymore. Like once you do leave that safety of being a child, you can't be protected. I think the dean even says to Feeny, you can't protect them anymore. They're not kids. And it's just like, yeah, if you want to be treated like an adult, I think it's really important for you to understand what adults have to deal with. If there's one thing millennials have learned, it is that when we were like, I want to be grown, I can't wait to grow up. We were like, if there was a wish.
Oh man. No, totally. Yeah, I think that's the lesson too. It's just that, like, you know, you're the transition between childhood and adulthood is probably filled with a lot more unexpected things than you think. And so by saying that you're ready for something that you don't know that you're ready for, or just being thrusted out into the world from high school to life, there's going to be things that you didn't expect that may be horrific in various ways. So yeah, I just think you guys tied it up really nice.
All right, homework. Oh, sorry.
No, great. We need to grade it.
Great. What grade are you giving this?
Yasmine?
I gotta say an A. I think this is one of the most powerful episodes of the whole series. And again, I think the fact that Boy Meets World tackled this topic as a kids show really is very significant, and it was done really well.
I have to agree with Yasmine. I'm going to give it an A as well. The fact that they chose to tell a story that they didn't have to tell at a time where it wasn't really being talked about. The fact that we had Topanga, like this, almost like, I think all of us kind of, regardless of our perception of her as we're actually watching episode to episode, the larger zeitgeist thinks of Topanga as this really strong, independent woman. And so to even show that she could even be vulnerable to this, I think is an interesting thing as well. So I just think there's a lot of really interesting conversations that are happening here that all age incredibly. The fact that Fred Savage is in the news right now for this just shows how well this episode ages. So that's why I think it deserves an A.
Absolutely. I think I'm really interested to see how the cast deal with this episode.
I mean, so curious.
They have a long time before they even get here, but I'm just like, oh, I want to see their read on it. But I will say that there's no denying that this is an A episode in my book. I feel like there are small little bits that keep it from being an A plus, but like in general, as everything that you guys said, the fact that it still is relevant, sadly, it still holds up. They tackle it in such a great way, and the acting is superb throughout. This is A all around.
No. All right. You know what? Let's get to homework. Yasmine, do you have any pop culture recommendations to our listeners as our pop culture expert?
Hey, have you guys seen? I don't know. When I was thinking about this episode, it made me begin to think about how women in sitcoms are treated. Have either of you watched Kevin Can Fuck Himself or F Himself? I don't know how.
No, I haven't, but I've wanted to. I've just needed an endorsement from someone, and if you're giving me one, I'm taking it.
I have to say, there's moments where like I think it could be better. It could have they could have taken the way that they subvert the genres better. However, it's a great show because it really subverts the classic kind of sitcom humor where the jokes are made at the wife's or the woman in the show's expense. And every time that happens, it's like, classic, like bright lights, cheery, they're in their living room. It looks like the set of Home Improvement, and it's like very wholesome. And they're making fun of Annie Murphy and da-da-da. And then as soon as she leaves the room and she's outside of that space with her husband, it's dark and it's moody and she wants to kill him because of how he's treated her.
Wow.
And he's treated by everybody in her circle in that space. So yeah,
almost like playing on the format the way WandaVision did, of just like kind of like showing us the sitcom format and then kind of playing with our ideas of it.
I haven't watched WandaVision.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Never mind. I've not seen it. I can't say. Really? I should watch it. But yeah, it definitely it plays with those with like the structure of that. And yeah, and I mean as this I think they could have maybe played with it a little better because the framework of it is there. And it's still great, but it could be better. But anyways, it's worth the watch.
Wow. Cool.
Annie Murphy's amazing. So
yeah, we'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
Okay, my homework for this week is Abbott Elementary season 2 is back. If we want to talk about teachers that are doing it right, I don't know.
Yeah.
Have you guys? Did you watch season 1 of Abbott?
Okay, so I've seen a handful of episodes, and none of them have been in order. Like I've just seen like a handful of season 1 episodes, but I haven't like binged it like I'm really intending to.
I have not watched it either.
You guys have to. You know what it is? I think that to me, especially if you're a fan of Boy Meets World, you clearly, like there is some kind of value on learning, and whether it's learning through life or learning through education, there's this idea of like Feeney being, it's something that we've all kind of carried around. And this show really appreciates teachers. It appreciates teaching, and it does so with the same kind of heart and joyfulness as like The Office or Parks and Recs. It's a mockumentary type style, but also, I think it's really great to see representation. There's no separating the fact that this show is also about a Black school, and one where the teachers are not dealing with funding the way that they should be, and having to really put in the work to make sure that their students get the best chance at an education as possible. And it's because of its respect towards the field of teaching and its still level of comedy and jokes. It's so fun, and season 2 just premiered, and it was everything that I needed it to be. And so I just want to again promote that. If we spent a lot of the first episode talking about bad teachers and those who blur the lines. I wanted to praise good teachers and just the show. Again, Quinta Brunson and Cheryl Lee Roth just won the Emmys for this show. It's a really, really good show, and one I'm really happy to endorse.
I've heard so many good things about it. I need to watch it.
I'll just quickly throw this out there. My homework for this week, and I specifically wanted to tie it to this episode, was the horror movie The Barbarian, which is out in theaters. I don't know how into horror either of you are. I know Siege sometimes is squeamish with it. But when I say that this was not only like I was genuinely scared, which I rarely get. Like there was a moment where like I am lying down flat in my AMC chair like this, which I never do.
And that's what like, freaks me out. If that's how you were, and you know how I am, I was like, I don't even know. I think I may just like do my Too Scared Didn't Watch podcast to get through it, because you've spoken about it and you speak about it very excitedly.
And the reason why I want to tie it to this specific episode is because, and I don't want to give too much away about this movie, but I know you're not going to watch it anyway. This movie is so smart in how it approaches the men and like how scary men can be. And there's an article that Collider wrote where they were just saying that like, hey, the true villain of this horror movie is men. And like just how it's just such a smart entry into like a feminist horror like canon, which like feminist horror is something that I feel like is so tied intrinsically to horror with Final Girls and like them. I feel like Final Girls, like horror movies were the first time I saw women fight back against attackers. Like there was the first time I saw them stand up for themselves. Like in so many ways, like horror is like a very strong vehicle to tell feminist stories, and I feel like this one is an incredible one. If you can get through the gore of it, if you can get through the horror elements of it, there is just so much that this movie talks about in terms of how women can protect themselves, being a good crime junkie, knowing the right things to do, but also how you can just put your trust into the wrong men and how it can like screw you over. I just think in terms of what this episode was about, this is a great companion piece for it. So
okay. You sold me. I gotta watch it. I love horror. It scares the shit out of me. Like I think like the deeply like psychological ones like really get to me. That's what scares me. But I still subject.
I've mentioned it a few times. The Too Scary Didn't Watch podcast. Shout out to them again. They've been helping me because you're right. I love like the social commentary on so many of these things, but I just can't do gore in that way. And so I'm like torn because like I want to know so badly, but I can't. I don't know if I can do the gore.
There's just so many twists and turns where I'm so afraid to even go into details about how this movie subverts my expectations, because I just want like I know eventually you probably watch it, so I don't want to spoil anything. But when you do, Yasmine, if you do, hit me up and we'll have a conversation about it.
Done.
What is it you think about horror that you respond to?
Me?
Yeah.
Do you know what? I don't know. I feel like I've always loved it. Like when I was growing up, I was really into like Are You Afraid of the Dark and Goosebumps, like a Ouija board. I was always into that. I don't know. Like it was something that I was always attracted to. I don't know what the reason was, other than it was just something I had just always found interesting. Maybe like the darkness of humanity in a way.
Yeah.
You
Sure.
know, which is why I feel like, yeah, which is why I don't know. If I watch a gory horror movie, that doesn't scare me. Like I'm not squeamish in that way, but it's the ones that are psychological that get me, because I think that's maybe what interests me is like when it's you know, like it could be real, like this could be something sinister or is happening in your brain or something, you know what I mean, that manifests in this creepy way. I don't know. I think
I want to point out something which I found very interesting as a millennial who we have on this show. You're the second guest who has talked to us about the importance of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Like, can I just say just how like significant that show was for introducing horror to children? For our generation, I was there every Saturday night. I was freaked out every Saturday night by this little tiny Canadian horror show. It's so good, and like the fact that it kind of like turned us into fans of it and made us realize that like, oh, you can actually just tell really interesting stories, and they're also scary, but they're still interesting stories regardless. I love.
Also have to say in that same vein, Goosebumps, because if I think those were both happening for me at the same time. Sure. Goosebumps the show, of course, as well, but I was always a big bookworm, and I still, you can see I have over there my little like bookcase. I have like 30 of them, and I still have them, but I loved them, and it was, I think also that paired with the show was really important in introducing that genre to a young generation, you know.
Definitely.
And R.L. Stine is still an icon. He's still writing Goosebumps books, you know, and it's because like that just kid, like, I don't know, kids sometimes you like to be scared. Although he says, oh my God, I had the enormous privilege of interviewing him, which was like,
what?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my God. It was I still can't believe it. He was so wonderful.
Casually throw in that I've met R.L. Stine. No big deal. It was close personal friends with him. He's on my, you know, we text. No big deal.
I wish I met him. It was over Zoom. Also pandemic. So I mean, like, wonderful that he, you know, made the time to talk to me in the midst of the pandemic. But no, we were talking about the 25th anniversary of the show, of Goosebumps, the show. And he said, you know, it was, he would write these stories, you know, that were fun, but he didn't make them too scary because, you know, at the same time, like, it's for kids. So he didn't get too into it. Like he like, you know, he didn't like take it too far.
He held back.
He held back to, you know, to honor that, you know.
Wow. I would love to see what
you too deeply.
I would love to see what not holding back looks like for R.L. Stine. Like when he's really trying to scare the bejesus out of kids. What would that look like?
I mean, like, remember Fear Street?
Fear Street
was for, I guess, for teens. I also was into that as well. I mean, still young, still like YA.
I never read the Fear Street books, but I loved what Netflix did with Fear Street.
Yeah, did we talk about that?
Yeah,
I think we did. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh,
the books were wonderful too. I mean, yeah, they felt like sort of classic, like, teen novels, but scary, and they were scary. I remember reading them, feeling
I have to say now, like, because I was just, what was so funny before I even knew you interviewed him, I was gonna be like, please protect R.L. Stine. No, no scandals. I just want to hear he's a good guy. I just want to enjoy that. And I was like, it's funny to me now as an adult. That's my fear. It's
not a celebrity dying. It's a celebrity betraying you in such a way that like it compromises how you can enjoy their work. Because if anything were to ever happen where it's like 17 women are accusing Tom Hanks of sexual misconduct, I was like, oh, so I just lost.
There's a whole other chunk I just gotta remove.
Whole chunk, yeah. Like, come on, like it's crazy.
Exactly. It's so true, you know, because then you it's like those sweet memories or those formative memories that you have attached to like that work or like this person or whoever they are, and it's just like, oh, and it like ruins it, you know. R.L. Stine was a wonderful, lovely joy.
Oh, yeah.
Yay!
Yeah, like, that's good to know.
Yeah, it was wonderful. So
okay. Yasmine, where can people find you? Where can they find your work? What do you want to promote?
So you can find me on Twitter, which I'm not super active on these days. I find it exhausting. So, but I am on there. I'm more active on Instagram. Both my handles at Yasmine Shemesh, and yeah. Or you can search me on Google. I do have like a portfolio of my work, which I try to regularly update. So
find that R.L. Stine interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, for real.
Oh. Yes, it's on my portfolio. I was really proud of that one.
You guys remember you can find us at bruhmeetsworld@gmail.com, or you can that was the email. You can find us on any of the platforms at bruhmeetsworld. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I love hanging with you guys.
Yes, it's so much fun. And
just getting deep into all of it, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me and for having me here.
We love having you. Always invited. Hey. I'm sure we'll have you back. I'm sure this will not be the last episode.
I'm always down.
Awesome.
All right, so I think it's time for us to remind the audience to dream,
try,
do good.
Yeah! Later, bruh.
Later, bruh.
When this boy meets world.